The Denver Broncos' second preseason game is in the books. Let's go over some studs and duds. So, unfortunately, the Denver Broncos lost their second preseason game against the San Francisco 49ers in a similar fashion that they lost their first game against the Arizona Cardinals because their third-team defense couldn't hold their water in the final part of the game. They ended up giving 3 consecutive scoring drives to the 49ers, and also the Broncos' third-string offense couldn't burn off enough time off the clock at the end of the game in order to seal the win. So, it was just a series of unfortunate events at the end of the game for the Denver Broncos that ultimately ended up costing us this one. But there was a lot of positive things to take away from this game, and I actually have a lot more studs on this list than duds, which is a stark contrast from last week. So without further ado, Broncos country, let's just go ahead and get right into it. The first stud that we have to talk about is Jaleel McLaughlin. He was the MVP of the game last night. I have been all aboard the Jaleel McLaughlin hype train ever since we signed him as an undrafted free agent in April. And not gonna lie, it's really cool to see my opinions of him get validated on the football field. He is making a massive difference out there. The dude is a really special talent, man. He may be a little bit undersized, but he more than makes up for it with his play style. The dude is able to dip underneath defenders and make them look silly and burst past them for a big gain. He's able to find just the tiniest little crease and he's able to hit it and then he's gone. It's insane. I mean, he's not just a one-cut runner either, man. He can make defenders look silly in the open field. He can make defenders look silly in between the tackles. Just impressive the way that this cat runs. And he not only made an impact in the rushing game yesterday where he had 7 carries for 45 yards, he also had a big 45-yard return on a kickoff, which is a really good thing to see after he fumbled on his first opportunity to return a kickoff. So that was really good to see him make up for that in spades and showcase that explosive playmaking ability on special teams. Then he also had 2 catches for 8 yards and a touchdown. He ultimately scored twice last night. So Jaleel McLaughlin, team MVP hands down last night, and he has solidified that RB3 role for the Denver Broncos. He is going to make this team, and he's going to get at least 4 or 5 touches every single regular season game behind Williams and Pirine. And when he does so, look for him to break off an explosive, massive play every time he touches the rock. That's the kind of dynamic playmaking ability that cat provides, and I'm so excited to see him make the most of his opportunity because ever since we signed him as an undrafted free agent, I knew that this cat was special, and it's just so awesome to see that get validated on the field. Another running back that I would put into the risers category is Javonte Williams. Javonte got his first game action since tearing his ACL, LCL, and posterior lateral corner in October of last year against the Raiders, and his stat line wasn't anything to write home about. 3 carries for 12 yards, 4 receptions for 18 yards, also got a rep in pass protection, but I feel like it was good to see him take that first hit down by the knees and be able to bounce up and shake off that initial contact. He said it himself in his post-game presser that was a big mental hurdle. That was a big mental hurdle for him to get over. And the fact that he got over that is going to be huge. We don't know if the Broncos are going to play their starters in their third preseason game against the Los Angeles Rams after we have joint practices against them, because sometimes teams will elect not to play their starters after having a joint practice because the joint practice almost simulates a preseason game, if you will. So we may not see Javonte Williams again until week 1 against the Raiders, but I'm confident that he's going to have a lot of that rust knocked off from this game, quite frankly. After going out there, taking that first hit, and bouncing back up with confidence, that was huge for him. So for that alone, I'm putting Javonte Williams in the risers category, in the studs category for this one. Unfortunately, we do have to move into some duds here, and I thought that it was a much cleaner performance from the offensive line overall. They had their fair share of negative plays, but it was nowhere near as egregious as in Arizona. But one guy who really stood out as a negative contributor on the offensive line last night was Ben Powers. And for me, Ben Powers has performed really strongly in training camp. He's probably been our most consistent lineman in training camp, but these past 2 games now in the preseason, he has not looked like the same player in practice. This cat is getting beat pretty consistently. He got beat at least twice that I could count in the San Francisco game. In Arizona, he gave up a batted pass. So overall, man, Ben Powers has not had a very strong preseason, and that's disappointing considering how well well he was performing in camp. So we need him to step up. The offensive line is really going to go as the interior goes. And if Ben Powers, our highest paid interior guy, cannot step the hell up, we're in trouble. Another dud that I would put on the offensive line is Lloyd Cushenberry. He didn't have a very great day out there after also having a pretty strong camp. He had 2 reps where you could tell he was just getting overwhelmed with physical lack of play strength, and that's been a problem with him pretty much his entire career. He will always get overwhelmed by guys who have a strong bull rush. He just doesn't have the ability to counter that in his tool belt because he just doesn't have the natural raw play strength, and that's an issue. The mental side of the game, I have no qualms with Lloyd Cushenberry. He's a very smart player. It's just physically, he's not the strongest cat out there, and that works to his detriment sometimes. So, unfortunately, Lloyd Cushenberry didn't have a very strong day out there against San Francisco, and he definitely does belong in the duds category. But it wasn't all doom and gloom on the offensive line, though. I'm actually going to put Garrett Bowles in the studs category. It wasn't perfect. He did have a couple of bad reps out there, but he at least looked competent. He at least looked like a somewhat decent caliber starting offensive lineman. Not saying it was anywhere close to perfect or a high level of play, but he doesn't look like he's going to be a liability out there like I thought he was going to be going into week 1. So that's good news, man. He wasn't egregiously getting beat for except maybe 1 or 2 plays, and he wasn't having to hold guys consistently either. I am still worried about Garrett Bowles. I feel like his movement and mobility has just been zapped because of this ankle injury. His quickness and agility with his feet, which was one of the greatest assets of his game, is just no longer there. So I'm still concerned about Garrett Bowles, but given the fact that he wasn't out there and wasn't a flat-out liability against San Francisco, I'm going to put him in the studs category for that and that alone. Another stud on this list I would say is Russell Wilson. He showed flashes of vintage Russ out there. His passing stat line does kind of leave a little bit to be desired, but I feel like it's a little misleading. He went 3 for 6 for, I believe it was 24 yards. Now, one of those passes was a dropped screen from Javonte Williams on the first play of the game. The second one was a throwaway where he didn't have anything downfield. And then the third one, he was trying to hit Jerry Jeudy in the end zone on a deep over route, and San Francisco actually held him. That was shown on the broadcast replay, and that threw off the timing of the route a little bit. Sure, it still had the chance to maybe be a completion, and you could definitely argue Russ overshot it a little bit, but I feel like that was the spot that Russell Wilson was expecting Jerry to be had he not gotten held up on his route. So you could really grade that particular play either way. I'm going to grade it as a play that the referees missed a hold on, and that should have been a touchdown, honestly. So that's how I'm going to grade that particular play. So with Russell Wilson, he looked really strong out there. He had a play where the offensive line did break down, unfortunately, but Russ was able to buy some time with his legs and extend the play, and Javonte Williams did a great job getting open on a scramble drill, and Russ connected with him along the left sideline. That was a really nice play. Russ took a read option for a really big game, and unfortunately that got called back because of a Cortland Sutton hold. We had a couple of wide receivers get called with holding penalties in this game. That was a little bit of an issue for us, especially on outside runs where the receivers were basically trying to seal the edge. We had one of those with the Jaleel McLaughlin run. I want to say it was Jalen Virgil or little Jordan Humphrey that got called for that one. We had a couple of those, unfortunately, just trying to seal the edge on outside runs. But even not counting that read option play that got called back, Russell Wilson made a couple of really nice plays with his legs and extended the play. He was able to take advantage of when the defense played man coverage and weren't accounting for him. He took advantage of those wide open rushing lanes where there were no linebackers in the middle of the field to take that away. So overall, that's the kind of thing that you want to see from Russell Wilson, and he just showed flashes, in terms of mobility at least, of the old Russell Wilson that we saw in Seattle for all those years. You can see where that weight loss has really benefited Russell Wilson, and I'm really happy to see that on film with him. I'd also say that because of Jaleel McLaughlin's incredible night last night, as well as Javonte Williams making his return, the rest of the Broncos' running game kind of flew under the radar a little bit. In fact, I'm going to come over here and take a look at the stats. I mean, Tony Jones Jr. had 3 carries for 45 yards last night. Samaje Perine, 3 carries for 22 yards. That's a 7.3 yards per carry average. Michael Burton with a couple of key conversions on 3rd down with his carries. So I thought we ran the ball really strongly last night. And because of Jaleel McLaughlin and because of Javonte Williams, I feel like Samaje Perine and Tony Jones kind of flew under the radar a little bit in terms of their performance. So I just wanted to give them their flowers and put them in the studs because I feel like their contributions in the run game really should not have gone unnoticed last night. I was also really impressed with our pass rush last night. I've got several of our pass rushers in the stud category. Zach Allen, who had a sack last night and was making pressures all over the place. He was wreaking havoc back there. Randy Gregory looked good. He had a sack. Jonathan Cooper was making pressures out there consistently. We had Nick Benito, who looked strong out there as well, although he didn't have a sack. There is one guy I will put in the duds category for pass rushers, and that's Frank Clark. Frank Clark was out there going against the second string offensive line for the 49ers, and he was struggling. He was getting manhandled by no-name players on that 49ers offensive line, and he was getting game action into the 3rd quarter. So I'm curious to see where Frank Clark is currently sitting on the Denver Broncos depth chart. That's something to monitor, and right now I do have Frank Clark in the duds category for that reason. Now, as we all know, it wasn't all sunshine, lollipops on rainbows on the defensive side of the ball either. Our 3rd team defense just gave up a really big collapse there once they got on the field. It was absolutely ridiculous. In fact, if we come over here and look at the recap of this, I'll go ahead and bring this into. We come over here and you will see that we got an interception on our first possession for the 3rd string defense. That was good. That was a play where Elijah Garcia got a ball that was tipped in the air by Matt Henningsen. That was a great play from him. Johnny on the spot. Unfortunately, we couldn't do anything with it. We ended up turning the ball over on downs at the San Francisco 37-yard line. That was a problem. Then San Fran went down and kicked a field goal. Trey Lance was just cooking up our 3rd string defense. We did score a touchdown, allowed a touchdown against San Francisco, but what really killed us was that on these last 2 drives right here, offensively, we went 3 and out and had to punt the ball away. Ben DiNucci was not a very strong performer out there. He's going to fall into our duds category for that reason. He just couldn't move the ball in 2 key drives for us after the interception there and then on the punt. That was a big issue, and then on the drive where they had to punt. So that was a big issue for us, and that's why Ben DiNucci falls into the duds category because he was a little bit indecisive with some of his throws. Overall, just wasn't the greatest performance from Ben DiNucci last night, and that combined with the collapse there on this last drive from our 3rd string defense, who also falls into the duds category, that's ultimately why we ended up losing this game. On the subject of Broncos quarterbacks, though, although Ben DiNucci does fall into the duds category, I would say that Jarrett Stidham falls into the studs category. This was the first time, both in the preseason as well as in training camp, that I can say that Ben DiNucci looked worse than Jarrett Stidham did out there, or Jarrett Stidham looked better than Ben DiNucci did, however you want to look at it. Jarrett Stidham was 12 for 17 through the air for 130 yards. Not bad on the box score stats. He did get some work with the 1st team offense. According to Sean Payton, that was always the plan, to get him a couple of snaps with the 1st team offense, just to get some of that chemistry there in case he has to go into the game in the regular season. Knock on wood that doesn't happen and that Russell Wilson doesn't get injured or anything like that. But in the event that does happen, we had to get Ben DiNucci a little bit of work with the 1st team. We had to get Jarrett Stidham a little bit of work with the 1st string guys. And because of that, I feel like Stidham was put in a much better position to be successful. But he was a lot more decisive with his throws. He looked a lot better and more refined and more polished out there. So for that, I'm throwing Jarrett Stidham into the studs category. Our next dud is somebody who's from that 3rd string defensive unit, but he stood out as a bad contributor amongst bad contributors, and that's Tremon Smith. This dude had a really rough game against Arizona last week, and that continued into this week. He was getting beat consistently in man coverage. He blew 2 zone assignments that I could count. Tremon Smith did not look good out there. They warmed him up with the return guys, but he never actually got a rep as a returner in this game. That's why I thought we brought him into the team to begin with, not even to contribute on the defensive side of the ball. So, I don't know, man. I don't even understand why Tremon Smith is still on the team, to be completely honest with you. He's one of my big cut candidates when we get down towards the cut deadline. Another stud that I want to talk about, Essane Bassi. He's now put 2 interceptions in a row on tape in preseason. This one was on a sailed ball from Sam Darnold. It was a great play by Essane Bassi, being exactly where he needed to be, Johnny on the spot. I feel like his Arizona interception was a lot better of a play from him, but it's still a good play nonetheless, and he definitely belongs in the stud category. Elijah Garcia, he had 2 sacks in the Arizona game, had the interception in this game. He belongs in the stud category. I feel like he's making a strong chance to make the active roster. Duds, Alberto Cuebanam has been non-existent in the preseason, hasn't gotten any looks. He's going to be cut. He's not making this team. I don't even think he's making the practice squad. Marquez Callaway was pretty quiet out there. He's going to be our final dud of the evening. I wish we could have gotten more looks from Marquez Callaway, and I wish he would have made a bigger impact. He didn't have a catch in the game. Brett Maher and Riley Dixon are our final studs to round out the evening, though, guys. I thought our special teams looked a lot better. Brett Maher redeemed himself, 2 for 2 on field goals with a long of 48. He was 2 for 2 on PATs, which has been his big bugaboo of his career. Didn't have any issues there. Riley Dixon looked a lot better as well. He was super inconsistent against Arizona, but in this one, he was booming balls. He had 4 punts for an average of over 60 yards. That was awesome to see from Riley. So, good bounce back performance from him as well. So overall, I feel like the Broncos had a lot of positive things to take away from the San Francisco 49ers preseason game. It's just we need our third string defense, and we need Ben DiNucci to play better in that scenario where we're trying to close out the game and we're trying to take time off the clock on offense. That was our big killer for us, was that our defense at the end couldn't hold up and we just couldn't take enough time off the clock on offense. So overall, I feel like there's plenty to clean up from this game, but there's also plenty of positive things to take away from this game. I'm curious, Broncos country, are there any studs or duds that I may have missed? Drop those comments down below and let me know as always. Be sure to leave a like on this video as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos appear in your notification feed. I would really appreciate it, guys. Those are 2 free and easy ways to show your support. Helps tell the old algorithm to push us out and helps us get seen by more and more members of Broncos country just like you and me. And until next time, guys, this has been another episode of Denver Broncos Syndicate. I am your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.